To be honest, when I was planning to record this episode and I was planning everything, I did not expect to do this much talking about guys. Fortunately, it won't just be talking about guys, because I've got a couple of unpopular opinions on relationships that I feel just need to be discussed, so I'm gonna get into those by all means. But before I do that, I want to start things off by engaging some new news about some old people. Now, Rupert Murdoch, the guy that is behind CNN and a bunch of other media sites, is set to marry for the fifth time at the age of 92 years old. 92 years old. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but by the time you're getting to the fifth time, no matter how old you are, don't you feel like you've probably outgrown that shit? Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I'm thinking by the time you're going to propose for the fifth time, or at least I'm suspecting that you're proposing for the fifth time, and every person you propose to you got married to, you're probably already used to that shit, that your left knee or your right knee, whichever one you choose to go down on, is probably already tired of that shit. Like, it sees the ring and it's like, fuck it, now we have to scrape the ground again. But anyways, let me just read the story real quick. Now, according to BBC News, the Post says, and I quote, "Wedding bells are set to ring again for media tycoon Rupert Murdoch, who is to marry for the fifth time at the age of 92. Murdoch met his future wife, 66-year-old Anne Leslie Smith, at an event at his vineyard in California in September. He split with his fourth wife, Jerry Hall, last year. Murdoch said he proposed to Smith, who was married to late country singer Chester Smith, on St. Patrick's Day, noting that he was quote-unquote 1/4 Irish and had been very nervous. For us both, it's a gift from God. I speak Rupert's language. We share the same beliefs," Smith said. End quote. Now, let's be particularly honest. Considering that this guy is doing it for the fifth time, I tend to think that this is probably his way of being sweet to his women. Because when you kind of think about it, probably the guy had heard that old saying of the wedding being the woman's best day. Or at least, every woman's favorite day or some shit. They always look forward to it, blah, blah, blah. And he's probably thinking, you know what, let me give her the best here, right now. Then I can continue giving some fake bullshit, kind of like CNN, for a little bit, before, she decides that she wants to leave me. Because when you're thinking about getting married at the age of 92, this is your fifth marriage. You've technically married 4 other people, so I don't know, maybe it's just me, but there's a track record of being married, I think, every 14 years since birth. And I don't think he was married that early on, which even gets a little bit crazier. And I know maybe there might have been one person or two who might have died along the way, but still, that's a fuck ton of people. I think by the time you're 92, you're probably just trying to, be together and live together and not necessarily have to worry about a wedding. Because when I think about it, I tend to think that this dude has probably spent more on weddings than what I, my brother, my father, and my mother have spent our entire lives on education. Because honestly, by the time you're doing it for the fifth time, I tend to think that he'd probably be bored of that shit. So the fact that he's nervous and he's proposing for a fifth time is a little bit odd for me. Although, let's be very honest, considering that I am going to be dealing with a bunch of unpopular opinions, I probably should be used to odd right now. And I do kind of like it to a little bit. Not the marriage for the fifth time, but just the fact that there's a bunch of odd shit coming your way. And I probably should have told y'all that there's odd shit coming your way after I started with an intro like, "Welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya." The man on the mic is a man who does not think that this many marriages is that important. Because by the time you're going past wedding number 3, the events and the catering guys are probably looking at you like it's Return of the Mac. He's a man who believes that running his mouth is the best form of cardio. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Tweet Street, the show where we take a deep dive into Twitter, pull up a couple of tweets, and break them down a little bit. Now, as usual, if you know the drill, you can repeat it after me. If you don't know the drill, then I will be more than happy to say it for you. And if you do know the drill but you don't want to, it's still okay, because the drill is a pretty simple thing. It is how you get to contribute the many tweets that you'd want discussed or that you find controversial in relationships for me to come and break down on this episode. And it's a pretty simple drill, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. you send it to the DMs of @bagakathed, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. On Facebook or on IG, if it happens to be a screenshot, a screen grab, or even ended up making a reel, then the place to send it to is @BreakTimeOnWestside on Facebook or on IG. The DMs are always open, and I would be more than happy to take it from there and handle it accordingly. Now, I do have a couple of unpopular opinion type tweets that are coming up. And I know I did unpopular opinions about 2 weeks ago, if not 3. And you might be thinking it's the same thing, but no, this unpopular opinions thing kind of did branch out and it went into the relationship space. So I get to cover that as well, because I feel like when it's that specific, there's way more wild shit to come out. And I will get to that. But before I do, I want us to go to Uganda for a little bit. And there was something that came out in the middle of the week that drove some people sideways. But when I ended up looking at the entire thing, I realized that people were actually jumping to conclusions a little too fast. And I am going to get into that. But first, before I get into that, because I almost forgot, this is the final episode of the season, just so that the rest, if not most, if not all of you are now aware. And for the next probably about 3 weeks, if not 6 episodes, I will be doing shortened versions of the podcast just so that I can get a bit of breathing room. And it is known as Raw Zone. It has barely any instrumentals, it's barely any editing. It's literally just me unloading my thoughts on certain particular topics. The topics are being sent in. Maybe if you throw in yours, I might just consider it. But all in all, that's what's going to be happening for the next 3 weeks before we resume for another episode of the regular shows on Breaktime on Westside. So I figured I might as well just say that first before I get into anything, so that I don't end up forgetting to inform you guys about any current developments with the podcast. Now, all that said and done, I can now get down to this story. Now, Uganda recently passed a death penalty law for homosexual offenders. Or at least that's what the title was if you decided to go to the Citizen TV Kenya IG page and you were looking through the news. And the moment a bunch of people saw that, they decided to post up on their stories and they were talking about how bad it is, about how the world is this much more unsafe as a place to be in. Oh, shit is becoming so cruel. Oh, why can't you let people just be free? Blah, blah, blah. Like, people were busy losing their shit for all the wrong reasons. And I know me saying all of this makes me sound a little bit homophobic, and you can think that. I wouldn't, fault you for thinking that. It's just that that's not entirely the case. Because unlike most of you that were posting this up and were talking about how bad it is, I actually read the full article. I didn't just see the caption slapped on and posted up on someone's stories and decided to just jump the gun. And I am going to read it for you, so here it goes. It says, and I quote, "As the sky dust in Uganda on Tuesday, March 22nd, so are members of parliament coming to a consensus about introducing a death penalty for the offense of aggravated homosexuality minutes after enacting the anti-homosexuality bill. The bill proposes tough new penalties for same-sex relationships which were arrived at after hours of bickering in the House. The death penalty was revised from a previously proposed punishment of 10 years imprisonment, according to the Daily Monitor. In the enacted bill, aggravated homosexuality is defined as the offense of homosexuality on persons below 14 years or above 75 years. Other persons considered victims are persons living with disability or mental illness, persons suffering from a terminal illness, or if the offender is a parent, guardian, or serial offender. The proposed penalties now await President Museveni's approval to assent it into law. Homosexuality is already illegal in Uganda, and it was not immediately clear what the new penalties had been agreed upon. According to the Penal Act Code, any person charged guilty with the offense faces a 14 years imprisonment." End quote. So, if my understanding isn't too improper, at least according to the way this article's been written, essentially what's being said is they do not want homosexuality to people below the age of 14 and above the age of 75. And if you're caught engaging in homosexuality with any of them, then you do face the death penalty. So in other words, a couple of woke pro-LGBT people are pretty much saying that the world is no longer a safer place because you suffer the death penalty if you go and, if you're a man, shag a pre-teen boy or someone's grandfather. Yeah. I don't think they fully understood what was being said here. They kind of just chose to go with the title and say that shit's going sideways instead of actually reading the entire thing. Otherwise, whatever the hell that they're saying, it's pretty much in favor of pedophiles and or people that like shagging old people and more so raping them against their will, which is very, very odd. I honestly thought liberals were a lot better than this, that you guys were actually trying to fight for, minorities and the little guy and so on. But if you guys are fighting for pedophiles as well, yeah, I'm not entirely on your side on this one. And to kind of mark that, I am going to leave a clip that I found to be particularly interesting from the Ugandan parliament before I get into the first tweet, so here it is.
Right Honorable Speaker, when I look at you and the honorable ladies in this house, there is no reason for a man to run after a man for sex. Right Honorable Speaker, Right Honorable Speaker,
Honor.
Right Honorable Speaker,
Order.
Right Honorable Speaker,
Honorable members. Honorable members.
Right Honorable Speaker, there is nothing so sweet and so good for a man more than a woman. And for that reason, there should be no reason for a man to run after a man.
Anyways, all that said and done, we have a couple of unpopular opinions to start handling. So, on to our very first unpopular opinion of this episode. Relationships are for people who have their life together. You have no business dating if you're fighting demons and losing. I don't know if this one can classify as an unpopular opinion, but I do have my disagreements with this entire thing, at least on a collective level, not on an individual level, just mainly on a collective level. Because it sounds sort of straightforward when you tell people, relationships are for people who have their life together, you don't have any business dating if you're fighting demons. And it does make sense. I totally get where it comes from, because you wouldn't want someone getting into another relationship with either previous relationship baggage or just personal baggage that they haven't handled, because that makes for a toxic relationship in a lot of cases, or it makes for a fairly needy partner, which can make the relationship a lot less fun, and it can end up making the relationship a lot less fulfilling than it probably should be, which I totally understand. Except that most people look at demons in the sense that they're looking at internal conflicts that they're having. So stuff like if you have insecurities, if you have, say, some sort of an addiction or a certain personal problem, say, for example, if it's like porn or gambling, shit like those do kind of factor in as fighting demons. But if you look at the idea of getting your life together, a lot of times for a lot of people, more so guys, it relates to finances. And when you introduce that extra bit there, now it starts to complicate things, because when you say that relationships are for people who have their life together, what exactly is having your life together as a guy? It's pretty much ensuring that you probably have no debts, or you have a good debt to equity ratio or some shit. You have a pretty well laid out life where you are making good money, you stay in a nice place, you probably drive at least a decent car or some shit, and you're living a fairly comfortable life. Now, you try and you check that with the current young men that are out there, and there's not that many of them that are living like that. When I was busy talking about the Pew research on the last episode of Battle of the Sexes, the one that was from this week, episode 377, I was talking about how most young guys right now are living paycheck to paycheck with a loan on the side that they're kind of trying to sort out in some way or another. And as such, you can kind of look at it like that and be like, oh, they seem to have their life together, but that's not really the case. A lot of them aren't having their life together, because if they lose the job, if the paycheck comes in probably like a week or two late, these guys are absolutely screwed. Some of them might actually find it very, very hard to survive. And for some of them, they'll get into the financial red. because that's when some of them might end up using unscrupulous financial methods to try and sort themselves out, such as getting money from loan sharks, borrowing from friends, and they might not be that great at returning money back, and that can screw them up quite a bit. And the thing is, that makes up a massive chunk of a lot of Nairobi's guys, especially the ones that are under 30, if not even under the age of 35. So are you saying that all of those guys shouldn't be dating? When you kind of think about it that way, then it doesn't seem like that great of an idea for the collective generation that is the millennials and Gen Zs. And I can get into why that's the case with like the mating crisis and like global population and shit. But with that aside, at the end of the day, if it is something that you choose to do, or at least if it is a philosophy that you choose to have on an individual level, then that's particularly fine. I have pretty much the same kind of philosophy right now, which is kind of why I'm not dating. But if you believe that that should be a collective philosophy for a lot of people, I don't think that that's going to be the best idea for most people, more so the current generation of potential fathers and mothers. But then again, it is an unpopular opinion, and as such should be debated, so I will leave it at that, and I will move it on to our very next unpopular opinion of this episode. People are lazy to put in the work for relationships, but somehow want to enjoy the fruits of the difficult work that has to go into it. This I totally agree with, especially with the current crop of people that have all of this entitlement and all of these expectations, and a lot of them do tend to be babes, even though there are some level of people that are guys. It is particularly true. There's a lot of people that want to enjoy the fruits of having a good long-lasting relationship, and yet they aren't even in positions where they can have such fruits come to them. Because, for example, when you think about these long-lasting relationships and all the great stories that they have about each other, and you actually sort of think about it, these guys had to go through a bunch of shit when they were young. They didn't have it all great. They had some tough times. They had some great times. It wasn't all smooth sailing. They had issues between each other. They had a lot of shit that happened within their environment, whether external, whether familial. Like, all of that shit kind of came up there, and the fact that they chose to stick together and they chose to work through shit and they chose to work around shit is a part of the reason why they are still together and they have such a great relationship. The problem is, there's a lot of people that do want that, but they don't want to put in the kind of work that's there. You're finding babes that are in a relationship with a guy, and I'm not saying that this is supposed to be the default, but the guy goes ahead and messes up once. I'm not gonna say how, but he goes ahead and he messes up once. You don't want to forgive the guy, you leave him. You guys have been together for only 3 months. You leave, you want to go and be with the next guy. You're with another guy for like 3-6 months. You get tired of them because they're annoying, blah blah blah. You choose to leave, or he chooses to leave you because you're just an annoying nag, and then they move on. And at the end of the day, you have people who've been switching relationships and they're like, oh, I want a good long-lasting partner. I want someone that I can have kids and, be grandparents together with and be super happy. But you're not even investing the time to actually be with this person and take them with their flaws and learn to work with them and learn to work around them so that you can make it better. And the truth of it is, in as much as it seems like I am targeting the babes, of which to a good degree I am, this appeals to both genders. If you're immediately ducking at the sign of something bad coming your way with your current partner, and you're pretty much leaving every time things are bad, then how the hell do you expect to have a good long-lasting relationship, and yet you haven't had a long relationship in the first place? And I'm not going to act like I'm immune from this. I definitely made my mistakes, and I definitely got out of relationships, before they lasted that long in the past. But when you look at a lot of people nowadays and you look at how they tend to deal with situations, you're with someone, you have a couple of issues, 2-3 issues later, like, you decide to throw them under the rug and then you break up at some point. You realize that instead of actually trying to have a healthy relationship, especially where there's communication involved, you just have issues, you get fed up with this person, and then you're like, you know what, I think there's something better on the other side. I'm gonna leave this one and then I'm gonna move. And you think about it, I don't think that's how most of our grandparents actually stayed together. I don't think that's how some of our parents actually stayed together. Because you go and you meet up with someone, or at least with a couple that's been together for over 50 years, and they're giving you stories. It's not like they're going to sit down and talk about all the times that, the man was bringing a Valentine's gift and what the Valentine's gift was. That's not the most important thing. It's not like they're going to be talking about all the fancy places they went for dinner. It's not like they're going to talk about how much pussy the guy was allowed to go and get while they were together. They'll probably talk about how they held together during some of the tougher times, stuff like that, because that's the relevant shit that matters to long-term relationships, the labor that comes with it, the ability to be resilient and to stick together during tough and great times. And so maybe for us as young people, we need to start actually having the attitude where we're like, you know what, there's some shit that's going on with this other person, but I do feel like it is worth sticking around with them, because I do believe that I do want to, go for the long haul with this person. Although maybe my generation is doomed or us guys are just too problematic. Either way, I will leave it at that because I have one more unpopular opinion to discuss. So on to our very last unpopular opinion of this episode. Men take women to fancy restaurants to show off the monetary might. Women will only post videos and photos of fancy restaurants and food to show off to their peers. The need to meet or be with people is no longer there. Dates have become superficial. People have become fake. Is that really the case? I don't know. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you. It actually is kind of the case. Dates have become particularly superficial to a certain degree because, there's guys that will take a babe to an expensive restaurant so that they can show that they're this top level guy. Or, they're worth this much money and the babe should want to be with them for the long haul. Because it's not like the babes are immune from that shit, because from the taking of the photos and the videos to post up on IG to the whole, going for an expensive date with someone and using it as a bragging right to your friends or to sort of assert your level of value. Like, it's not like the babes are sort of immune from trying to, superficialize a date with a person that you're not supposed to be dating with anyone else. Because I kid you the hell not, like, there's this thing about babes and using the cost of a date, or at least using the value of a date and the value of the person that's with them in terms of net worth, to sort of try and measure their worth when it comes to the dating market. Because I've experienced this with some of my female friends when they talk about their experience in the dating market and how they're supposedly this top tier babe because even a guy that was willing to blow like 5 figures on this or was willing to take them here and there didn't really appeal to them because they look for something more. Or, I was with so and so and they're this top level person and yet I still didn't say yes to them. And they usually sort of wear this almost like a crown of like, I'm this top tier high value babe, and yet it's not supposed to be the case because, even rich niggas can simp and shit. But they tend to do that and, they can use it to sort of assert their dominance or at least assert their value to their female friends or even their male ones. But essentially, when you kind of look at dates and how dates have been since the beginning, they have always been capitalistic to a certain degree. And by capitalistic, I mean that there's supposed to be value gained on at least one side, if not both, when it comes to dates. It's not just a money thing. Because when you look at the concept of the date back then, the old school traditional type of dating that babes like to talk about, a guy would pretty much try to show that he is of value, and he would also seek to see if the woman that he is trying to woo is also of value. And it would be pretty much the same exact thing with a babe. So both of them are trying to show value in each other. And if there is value that's shown, then they definitely see, where they can sort of gain together and they sort of come together and they sort of have a bond and it works out. And if it doesn't, at the end of the day, at least you will have shown to her, if not probably she'll go and tell her friends, or you will at least have proven that you are a worthwhile man, and she will have proven that she does not fall for certain men. At the end of the day, there's value that's sort of gained on both ends. But when you look at it today, it's like the value took the form of like monetary gain and it was pushed to the front, because the statistics that show that majority of women nowadays go out on dates for the food. It's not even for the guy. Then now you can see that there's guys that are trying to show that they're at this, peak level by taking women out to expensive restaurants. then you look at the TikTok videos of people who've gone out on dates and some of the experiences, and in some cases you listen to the dudes and you're like, this guy pretty much dodged a bullet, and in some other cases you're listening to a babe and you're like, bitch, what the fuck do you expect niggas to go through just to be with you? And so at the end of the day, it kind of makes dating seem like a particularly superficial thing, which is kind of the reason why I haven't been a big fan of dating in a long time. I'm more of a Netflix and chill type person as opposed to going out on a date. Or if I am going on a date with a babe, I'd much rather it's not the typical restaurant style, let's dress well so that we can go and impress each other type shit, but something that can be a little bit more fun. You know, test our levels of adventure and shit. But, you know, that's just a me thing. Evidently, if this is how dates are going with this whole individualistic mindset where it's like I'm trying to be the one gaining here, then to be very honest, a lot of guys are going to stop trying to go out on dates with babes. And guess what? In the States, it's actually a thing. Apparently 63% of men under the age of 30 are supposedly single and they're not trying to date. And you can blame it on a bunch of things, but if dates are pretty much like this, then why the hell would they want to go out on dates and make a fool of themselves or end up with someone that is just an absolute piece of work? Either way, that was something that I actually discussed on Battle of the Sexes, which you can go back and listen to. But all in all, if you do feel like you disagree with what it is that I have said, then of course it is an unpopular opinion, so you are allowed to disagree with me because the DMs are open. On Twitter, it is at BagakaTheD. On Facebook and on IG, it is at Breaktime on my side. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and thank you so much for listening all through this season, through the changes and through the discussions. I do not take any of it for granted. Raw Zone resumes next week. Battle of the Sexes resumes 3 weeks after that. Thank you again for listening, and I will catch you guys on the next break.